Hello and welcome to my video on my artifact for 3D modeling assessment. As you can see, there it is in its beauty. I would say I'm relatively happy with it, despite my prior knowledge of 3D modeling and 3ds Max being basically zero. I am proud of how it came out. As you can see, it is a house. More specifically, it's my house from when I was a kid. Still living it now, of course, not in Portsmouth, but obviously I chose it because I know it. I'm familiar with it. As you can see on the screen now, doxing myself, sure that doesn't matter, but there's my road and there's my house, all lovely. Doesn't look too nice at the moment. It looks better sometimes. You can actually go back in time, which I decided to do here. 2008, when I was 4 years old. I decided to model it here, that exact screenshot, as you can see right there. Obviously, I chose this because I'm familiar with it. I like it. And it's cool to model something that you like, and especially something that you've lived in for a long time. Seeing something come to life that you've been in every single day, that you showed your family, your friends who have been there, it's cool. That's why I chose it. I didn't want to just do something random which I had no attachment to whatsoever. As you can see, I decided to model the house. I was going to go for the car as well, but my skills are limited and that would have taken bloody forever. But I went for the house. And I am happy with how it came out. And here we are in 3ds Max. The final thing, it's a lovely blue box. I'll start with talking about the problems I had with this project. The first one I had was the colours, as 3ds Max doesn't offer a great amount of colours, and of course textures don't count for anything in the assessment, so there's no point adding it. So it does look a little bit bland and doesn't really match the colours, but I had to work around it somehow. And I feel like the colours I did choose make it pop, make it look nice. So that's something I did well. Another problem I encountered was my lack of knowledge of 3ds Max, which did limit me to detail. Adding small details to the house is quite difficult. This is definitely something I can improve on to make the house look more appealing and more accurate to its original screenshot, but I did work around it by adding what I could to the windows and the doors and the little other details. Another problem I had within the artifact project was spacing and clutter. In the wireframe views, which isn't in the video, but due to the large amount of objects, it's a very cluttered. The way I counteracted this was I isolated my layers. I grouped my layers, which means I was only working with objects which I needed at the time, which made the whole process easier, freed space. It also allowed me to concentrate on what I needed to do, not get distracted by something that I may have needed to finish off, as well as giving me a blank canvas just to focus on one specific piece instead of focus on the whole thing. Another problem I had was optimizing the space which I had within the house. As you can see on the windows, there's nothing behind them. I could have filled it in with blue squares to make it look somewhat like a window, but I think it'll look a bit tacky, a bit cheap. So I stuck with what you can see on the screen, and I think it's alright. Now onto the techniques and processes I used within the project. As with all my shapes, I used edit polys for pretty much all my shapes. If I wanted to create a curve or an indent, I'd use the inset tool. If I wanted to expand or reshape any of my shapes, I'd use the extrude tool, as well as using the chamfer tool to create more detail in the doors and windows, as well as the bevel tool to do the same. When using these types of tools, I did find it quite confusing, as there is no real indication on the software of what they do. To me, they're just words. So research, Google helped. YouTube helped, which I used during the project in order to help me with more detailed sections of the project, including windows, doors. This is something I overcame in the project, which enhanced my knowledge of 3ds Max, making it easier to make a second project. Also in this project, I used lofting. I used lofting for the satellite on top of the house. I started off drawing a line, straight line, then added a 2D shape. Then using the lofting tool, I connected those two shapes together, which acted as a wire. However, in my case, I found that using regular cylinders probably would have saved time and effort, so wouldn't recommend. Another technique I used within the project was a raise. As you can see in the pipework on the roof, instead of creating one singular one, copy and pasting every single time, I used a raise to make multiple and stuck them together. This means that if I edit one of them, they all edit at the same time, and it's just easier. Put in a few numbers instead of Control C, Control V all the time. This was definitely helpful, saved time and effort. Another technique I used in my project was NURBS, which is often used to make more complex curves and shapes. In my case, I used it to make the guttering for the roof. I made a simple plane, took the middle vertices, stretched them to make a U shape. Then I used a raise, as previously mentioned, created multiple duplicates of them to make it easier, and added it to the side of the roof. Another useful tool I used within this project was the Boolean tool under compound objects. I mainly use this for the windows in order to remove space within shapes within the walls. Also, I use this to remove any little nicks or discrepancies within. I found this was the easiest way for me to do this instead of me going into Edit Poly and creating a whole new mess. Reflecting on the project as a whole, I'm proud of what I've achieved. I feel like my final outcome is good in my standards. However, I understand the final outcome does lack detail, something I would improve on next time. Trying to add more abstract objects, more detailed objects, using ways within the software to make my life easier instead of finding the hardest way to do it, which I seem to do a lot. Some things which seem so simple, I did a very long way, which took hours. However, something that I do really like about my project is that if I showed this piece to a family member or a friend, I think they'd be able to tell it's my house. That's something I really like about the project. It's got a bit of personality that I enjoy. Not just something that I'll just do this because why not. Onto my strengths that I found out while doing the project. I believe most of my strengths aren't practical. However, I do feel like I'm technically proficient, using the tools well, using the basic tools to a high standard, and my adaptability within the project, using new tools which I haven't learnt, researching how to use them, implementing it into my project. I feel like I did that well. To detail, probably could use work. Also, my problem solving within this project, as there were many times where I found myself stuck, not knowing what to do, head on the desk, but I powered through and overcame these challenges, which I believe is a real strength of mine. In terms of technical ability, I feel like from where I started and where I am now, it's 100 times better. As if you gave me this software a couple of weeks ago, I know we did in class, but I would be absolutely lost. But now I feel like I've learnt basic techniques as well as some more advanced techniques which I can use into a further project. Onto my weaknesses then. I feel like the obvious one is probably the steep learning curve, as my unfamiliarity with the software did lead to me struggling with adding detail, using more advanced techniques. Being able to find where to use these techniques was definitely a challenge for me. The technical side of this project was probably a challenge, as I feel like I was creative, open-minded, and I did overall enjoy creating the house. despite a couple long sessions of wanting to give up, but we got there in the end. Sometimes I feel like my time management skills weren't great. Some days I'll start it at midnight. Some days I'll go into uni, do like half an hour. I probably should have made a schedule or something like that. Sometimes I also overcomplicated it for myself, making my workspace overcrowded, clumped up, not being able to move around in the workspace, not being able to navigate, find my key objects, which is something I need to work on for next time. Also, just being able to troubleshoot, as there's things I don't know within the software, and me having to look things up, not be able to find anything, does have a knock-on effect, making the project take longer, probably dampening my motivation within the project. But identifying these weaknesses is the first step towards improvement. So with practice, I can overcome these challenges and develop my 3ds Max. Ultimately, the project was a success, an enjoyable project. I enjoyed it. I set out to do what I said I was going to do, sort of, and make my house. And I feel like I did this to a standard which I'm happy with. I've learnt my weaknesses, my strengths, probably more weaknesses, but that's not such a bad thing. So I know what to do for next time. I believe if I was to attempt a project like this again, I would choose something more difficult, with more complex curves and structures, and be able to use more techniques within the software, learn more techniques, and apply these techniques into a new project. But ultimately, I believe the project was successful. I hope you agree. Goodbye.